Over the last 100 years, Japan has emerged as a key player in international trade and innovation. Among other things, Japan is the world's third largest economy and the world's largest creditor nation, currently specializing in high-tech and precision goods. Since World War II, Japan's rapid economic growth has been referred to as an economic miracle, quickly transforming from a low-wage to a high-wage economy and securing its place as an economic superpower. However, Japan's economy has experienced some setbacks, such as slowed growth that resulted from the collapse of the Japanese asset price bubble. Consequently, Japan ran massive budget deficits, and the Japanese government is still facing the daunting task of dealing with a large public debt. Increasing competition, especially from China and South Korea, and widespread recession has definitely slowed Japan's remarkable economic growth. While its exports remain strong, Japan is vulnerable to fluctuations in consumption by other countries. Though the Japanese economy faces its own set of economic challenges, it is currently a very significant component of international trade. Consequently, we chose to examine Japan's economy in order to explore how a country with very limited land and natural resources maintains its position as such a powerful force in the global economic climate.
Japan's current economy is made up of predominantly three sectors: services, industry, and agriculture. Japan's industry sector is among the world's largest and technologically advanced producers of motor vehicles, electronic equipment, machine tools, and many more goods. Japan's GDP is $5.96 trillion and has had great fluctuation in the past 10 years. From 2004 to 2007, the GDP steadily grew, with its highest growth rate in 2004 at 2.4. After 2008, it has continued to fluctuate between negative and positive growth. The GDP per capita is $46,730 and continues to rise. Since 2004, GDP per capita has ranged from $35,000 to $40,000, but in 2009 it broke $40,000 and has been on the rise ever since. In 2012, Japan's unemployment rate was 4.3%. In 2008, a 4-year period of decreasing unemployment ended and the rate began to increase, reaching 5% in 2010. 2013's inflation rate was 0.4%. Over the past 10 years, the highest inflation rate was in 2008 at 1.4%, and the lowest was in 2009 at negative 1.3%. Japan's top exported products are cars, vehicle parts, and machinery, exporting predominantly to China, the US, South Korea, Thailand, and Hong Kong. Japan's biggest importing partners in rank are China, the US, Australia, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and South Korea, importing mostly crude petroleum, petroleum gas, and coal. Japan is currently a part of the Generalized System of Preferences, a preferential trading agreement with 137 least developed countries and 14 territories. Japan trades agricultural and industrial products, and the LDC's imports are both duty-free and quota-free. If these preferential imports come to threaten Japan's economy, there is an escape clause that allows imports of that good to stop for 3 years. After 2008, Japan's stocks in the FDI began to steadily increase, reaching 18.5 trillion yen in that year alone. Between 2010 and 2011, Japan's outward FDI increased by almost 85%, an increase of $4.187 trillion. Outward FDI in manufacturing industries increased by 194% and only slightly increased in inward FDI.
Japan's protectionism runs deep in its political and economic system, so much so that the Japanese believe their economic success has been due to protectionism. No one believes it has been due to free trade. As Japan has historically been the economic leader for Asia, its policies have been shared with nearby nations to a huge extent. The basis of these policies is an attitude towards economics, seeing the economy not as an end in itself, but an instrument of national power. Therefore, Japan illustrates how rational protectionism is a dynamic strategy and does not consist in defending every industry. Japan has a history of closed markets, which is a problem that has been declared to have been solved in recent years, but hasn't been. Congress has recently expressed concern about allowing Japan to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade negotiations. Japan is known to have a large number of non-tariff barriers and a tight integration of government policies, so Congress sees no way anyone can have fair trade with Japan. Japan's large barriers are hindering free trade and keeping everyone else out. However, excluding Japan, a long-standing U.S. friend and ally, from TPP negotiations would only foreclose any opportunity for progress. TPP is designed to reduce protectionist policies, and excluding of Japan from this is the opposite of what needs to be done to make their trade more open. The Japanese highly discourage migration, and their immigration control policy has been criticized for being restrictive. Japan's skeptical attitude toward foreigners is a result of their belief that it is a culturally homogeneous society and should stay that way. Japan's immigration policy has been closed for quite some time, as the public fears migrants are contributing to the rising crime rate and the deterioration of public security. The government amended the Immigration Control and Refugee Recognition Act in 2004, hoping to decrease the number of unauthorized foreigners. Japan is realizing they can't escape the consequences of globalization. They are gradually opening their country to foreigners, acknowledging that their long-cherished ethnic consistency may need to be changed under the shifting domestic needs. Social and economic factors are also contributing. Japan is facing a rapidly declining population, and it is estimated that the population will shrink by 50 million more by 2060. Also, rural cities have been experiencing local labor shortages and have been searching for Japanese workers. As a result of Japan opening its borders, the number of foreign nationals has nearly doubled in recent years. The business community is contemplating measures to manage migration to Japan in a more sustainable and humane manner, such as strategies for acceptance of and to make migration beneficial to all.
Japan's economy experienced a boom in the years after the Second World War. Japan held on to a protectionist policy, while the industrial technology that had come out of the war effort allowed them to become a major exporter of steels, plastics, and semiconductors. In the 80s, Japan started lowering its trade barriers. The US had urged Japan to reduce its tariffs and quotas, while the Japanese could see that they had an international obligation to free up their trade laws. Japan now finds itself somewhat behind the wave of globalization that has occurred. One way Japan has tried to overcome this issue is by promoting foreign investment in its economy. One of the main ways that Japan will encourage foreign investment will be the designation of special economic zones. Japan's economic sectors include agriculture, medicine, technology, and even tourism. In these zones, Japan hopes to gain investment and create opportunities for its industries. Tokyo will be dubbed as the special zone for business. Here, startups and international businesses will be encouraged through tax breaks for startups, as well as the lowering of the corporate tax rate so that companies have more capital to invest in themselves. The Japanese government will also adjust labor laws in these special economic zones. The result of these changes may make it easier for companies to hire and fire employees. While this could mean reduced job security for the population, it could also lead to higher wages. To encourage development in these zones, floor-to-area ratios will be reduced or done away with altogether. This will lead to the construction of taller buildings in the island nation, where land is a scarce factor. Since the end of World War II, Japan has maintained strong technological growth. Today, Japan has a hugely successful automotive industry and continues to pioneer into advanced robotic systems. Japan has also applied for large numbers of global patents in recent years. There is no shortage of technological innovation in Japan. Labor in Japan is a different story, though. Both population and population growth continue to decline. The shrinking workforce is taking its toll on Japan's labor market, especially in the agricultural areas. Aging Japanese baby boomers are becoming too old to work in the fields and rice paddies. Along with easing migration restrictions, the government has created labor programs that will allow foreign nationals to work in Japan for 3 to 5 years. Much of the redevelopment of the special economic zones will be aimed at the improvement of urban planning. One of the goals of this is to make the country more attractive to foreign nationals as a place to live and to work. This redevelopment will cause property prices to increase in some areas. Japan also has a deeply rooted culture. Much of this is due to the fact that there has been little migration to Japan and that the Japanese population tends not to be concerned with international affairs. Unless the Japanese population can make the shift from an internal to an external view of the world, Japanese firms will have to decide between hiring Japanese workers or foreign immigrants who may have a more global outlook. The change in Japan's culture could be drastic, with the influx of immigration as well as the shrinking Japanese population.
With the unforeseen tsunami, earthquake, and meltdown in March 2011, Japan faced many unprecedented challenges in its economy. The triple disaster cost Japan an estimate of $250 billion as well as 20,000 lives. Japan, in return, felt the effects of these incidents with the change in Japan's trade and currency. The natural disasters destroyed infrastructures, making it challenging for Japan to export supplies, therefore decreasing their exports. This had a major impact on Japan's lucrative automotive industry that makes up an important portion of Japan's core industrial sector. Toyota and Honda were forced to halt their production for months until they were ready to produce again. However, the demand for cars did not stop, and seeing that Japan could not supply enough cars, the U.S. automotive companies such as Chevrolet and Ford took this opportunity to supply consumers. Today, Japan's car industry is sufficiently supplying the demand for cars, but the long-term effect of 2011 cost them 17% of market share that will be forever difficult to regain. Exterior countries that imported from Japan also suffered from the stop in production. Because of the nuclear leak, there was also a period of surveillance on food, mainly on milk and grains, due to the radioactivity that the land had exposed to, causing the amount of exports to decrease as well as Japan's GDP. The leak of the nuclear reactors, which provide for 1/3 of the electricity of Japan, has had a long-term effect as well. They have since then increased the amount of imports on oil in order to make up for the supply of electricity. Therefore, their imports have increased rapidly by 11.9%, and exports have decreased by 2.2%, making Japan more dependable. Even though this was bad news for Japan, other countries did not seem severely affected because Japan only encompasses a small amount of the world GDP. The Japanese currency suffered due to these events as well. The first months after the disaster, the yen fell by 0.8% but increased by 8.5% by the end of October 2011, better than it had been before the tsunami. The reason for this drastic change was due to the Japanese investors who sold their overseas assets and changed their money into yens. By 2012, however, the Japanese government placed policies to decrease the deflation of the yen, which only caused its value to go down. The yen-to-dollar exchange rate decreased by 25% in 2003, which has put the U.S. in an advantage over imported goods from Japan.